14-year-old Danny Fletcher had already learned that survival sometimes required impossible choices. But standing before the most feared rancher in Colorado Territory with his little sister's hand in his, he was about to discover that some men collect lost children the way others collect cattle, and for reasons that might surprise everyone, including themselves. Danny had spent the last 2 years keeping Lucy safe through circumstances that would have broken most adults. But at 14, he was running out of options and running out of hope. The worn doll clutched in 9-year-old Lucy's arms was their only remaining connection to the family they'd lost. And Danny would do anything, even sacrifice himself, to ensure she had a chance at something better. But Ezra Blackwood was about to prove that the most fearsome reputations sometimes hide the most generous hearts, and that sometimes the best families are built not through blood, but through the courage to choose each other when the whole world seems determined to tear people apart. Copper Creek in 1887 was a frontier town where survival of the fittest wasn't just philosophy, but daily reality, where children without family protection faced prospects that ranged from exploitation to starvation, depending on their luck and resourcefulness. The Colorado Territory's mining boom had created wealth for some, while leaving others, particularly orphans and widows, scrambling for basic necessities in an environment where compassion was often viewed as weakness that couldn't be afforded. Ezra Blackwood's ranch represented one of the few success stories in a region littered with failed dreams and broken families. But his reputation for stern dealing and minimal tolerance for weakness made him an unlikely source of salvation for two desperate children. The vastness of his holdings and the respect or fear his name commanded throughout the territory suggested power that could either protect or destroy, depending on his inclinations and the supplicant's ability to prove their worth. Danny's transformation from carefree child to fierce protector had begun 2 years earlier when cholera swept through their family, claiming their parents and leaving him solely responsible for Lucy's survival in a world that had little patience for dependent children. His crash course in adult responsibilities, finding shelter, securing food, avoiding the kind of attention that might separate them or put them in danger, had aged him far beyond his years while teaching him to read people and situations with the accuracy that meant the difference between safety and disaster. The weight of being Lucy's only protection had given him strength and determination that impressed adults, while also isolating him from the childhood he'd lost to necessity and grief. The desperation that brought Danny to Ezra Blackwood's door represented the culmination of months of increasingly difficult survival as winter approached and their meager resources dwindled toward nothing. His fabricated story about the Morrison Gang, born from overheard saloon conversations and dime novel plots, demonstrated both his intelligence in crafting believable deceptions and his desperation to find protection for Lucy, even if it meant sacrificing his own safety. The courage required to approach the territory's most intimidating rancher showed how far he was willing to go to secure his sister's future, even when that future might not include him. What made Danny remarkable wasn't just his devotion to Lucy, though that impressed everyone who witnessed it, but his ability to maintain hope and humanity despite circumstances that might have made other children bitter or cruel. His instinctive understanding of people and animals, his willingness to work hard without complaint, and his natural leadership abilities had been honed through necessity, but reflected innate character that no amount of hardship could destroy. Most importantly, his capacity to trust again after losing everything to believe that adults might be worthy of faith rather than just sources of disappointment would prove essential when faced with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Danny's desperate gambit in approaching Ezra Blackwood created a test situation that neither the boy nor the rancher had fully anticipated, challenging both to reveal their true character under pressure while navigating a relationship that defied easy categorization. For Danny, the choice between potential salvation for Lucy and his own safety forced him to confront his deepest fears about abandonment while demonstrating the extent of his love for his sister. For Ezra, the sudden appearance of two desperate children activated grief and longing he'd buried since losing his own family, while also providing an opportunity to address the question of legacy that had haunted him since accepting that his bloodline would end with his death. The month-long trial he proposed created artificial timeline that would test whether genuine family bonds could develop between strangers united only by mutual need. The central tension revolved around whether Danny's protective instincts and Lucy's need for security could overcome their wariness of adult promises, while Ezra struggled to balance his desire for family with his determination not to repeat the devastating loss that had nearly destroyed him when his wife and son died. But as Ezra's silence stretched into minutes while he studied two children who'd risked everything on the hope that someone might care whether they lived or died, none of them realized they were about to discover that the best families are often those that choose each other when they have every reason not to trust but decide to hope anyway. The moment when Danny offered himself as sacrifice to secure Lucy's safety represented more than desperate strategy. It was the culmination of 2 years of brotherly devotion that had transformed him from child to protector, willing to face any danger if it meant his sister could find security and happiness. His fabricated story about the Morrison gang, while dishonest, demonstrated both his intelligence in understanding what might motivate a powerful man to help and his desperation to find any argument that might convince someone to care about Lucy's welfare. Lucy's terror at the prospect of separation from her brother, her fierce grip on his hand while simultaneously trusting his judgment about their best chance for survival, showed the complete faith that had sustained them both through months of hardship and uncertainty. Her clutching of the worn doll, their last connection to the family they'd lost, symbolized both her need for comfort and her resilience in maintaining childhood innocence despite adult responsibilities that circumstances had forced upon her. Ezra's prolonged silence while studying the children wasn't cruelty, but careful assessment of their character, their relationship, and their genuine need for protection versus temporary assistance. His decision to take both children, rather than choosing between them, marked the beginning of his own journey from isolated grief toward the possibility of building new family bonds based on choice, rather than biology. The immediate departure he demanded tested their commitment while also protecting them from potential dangers that might follow if they remained visible in town too long, beginning their transition from desperate survival to protected security. The journey to Blackwood Ranch served multiple purposes beyond simple transportation, providing time for all three to assess each other's character while beginning the gradual process of building trust that would be essential for their month-long trial to succeed. Ezra's careful attention to the children's comfort during travel, ensuring adequate food, rest, and protection from weather, demonstrated consideration that surprised Danny while beginning to ease Lucy's fear of separation from her brother. The conversations that developed during evening camps allowed Ezra to learn about their history while sharing carefully selected details about ranch life and his expectations for their behavior and contributions. His discovery of Danny's natural empathy and Lucy's resilience gave him hope that they might adapt to ranch life while also revealing personality traits that reminded him of the family he'd lost, without being painful replicas of his deceased wife and son. Danny's gradual relaxation of his protective vigilance as he observed Ezra's consistent kindness toward Lucy marked the beginning of his own healing from the hyper-awareness that had been necessary for their survival, but exhausting to maintain continuously. His growing curiosity about ranch operations and Ezra's willingness to answer questions about livestock management, land use, and business practices suggested possibilities for future development that neither had explicitly acknowledged. The preparation also included practical elements as Ezra began teaching them skills they would need for ranch life while assessing their aptitude for various tasks and their willingness to learn and work hard rather than expecting charity without contribution. Their arrival at Blackwood Ranch marked the beginning of the most challenging phase of their trial period as Danny and Lucy had to prove themselves worthy of the security and opportunity they'd been offered while adjusting to lifestyle changes that were both wonderful and overwhelming. The introduction to Miguel and Rosa provided additional layers of support while also creating new relationships that required navigation and trust building beyond their connection with Ezra. The comfortable house they were given represented the first stable living situation they'd experienced since their parents' death, creating emotional responses that ranged from gratitude to anxiety about whether their good fortune was temporary or sustainable based on their performance and behavior. Lucy's immediate fascination with having her own bed and space for her doll showed how much their previous circumstances had required in terms of adaptation and sacrifice. Danny's assignment to ranch work provided both opportunity to prove his value and challenge to develop skills he'd never needed during their urban survival period. His natural ability with horses, particularly his success in calming the troubled mare Tempest, demonstrated talents that even he hadn't known he possessed, while also providing concrete evidence of his worth to ranch operations. Most importantly, the early days established routines and expectations that created structure both children had been missing, while also beginning the gradual process of emotional attachment that could transform their arrangement from temporary assistance to permanent family bonds. Because proving yourself worthy of a new family required more than just good behavior and hard work, it demanded the courage to believe that adults could be trusted to keep promises and that happiness might actually be sustainable rather than just a temporary break from suffering. The first major challenge emerged as Danny struggled to balance his ingrained protective instincts toward Lucy with the need to allow her independence and growth in their new environment, creating tension between his role as brother protector and his developing identity as ranch worker and potential heir. His hypervigilance, while understandable given their history, sometimes interfered with Lucy's natural adaptation to ranch life and her growing confidence in her own safety and security. Learning to trust Rosa and Miguel with Lucy's care while he worked required conscious effort to overcome survival patterns that had kept them alive but were no longer necessary. The adjustment from constant alertness to relative security was more difficult than either child had anticipated, requiring emotional and psychological healing alongside their physical recovery from months of inadequate nutrition and shelter. The second escalation came when Danny's natural talents with horses began attracting attention from neighboring ranchers interested in hiring him, creating offers that could provide immediate independence but would require leaving Lucy behind with Ezra. The temptation of economic autonomy conflicted with his commitment to keeping their family unit together, while also testing Ezra's commitment to keeping both children rather than just the one whose skills were proving most valuable to ranch operations. The external interest in Danny's abilities also raised questions about whether Ezra's generosity was motivated by genuine affection or calculated assessment of their economic value to his business, creating doubt about the authenticity of their growing family bonds. The third challenge was the most emotionally complex: the gradual development of genuine affection and trust between the children and Ezra, complicated by their fear that caring too much would make eventual loss more devastating if circumstances changed. Their growing comfort with calling him Papa Ezra, their increasing reliance on his guidance and protection, and their obvious happiness in their new life created vulnerability that both children found simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. The psychological adjustment from survival mode to security required them to lower defensive barriers that had protected them through trauma, making them emotionally available for family bonding, but also susceptible to devastating hurt if their trust proved misplaced. External pressure intensified when legal authorities began asking questions about the sudden appearance of two children at Blackwood Ranch, requiring documentation and explanations that could expose the fabricated story about the Morrison gang, while also challenging Ezra's right to custody without formal adoption procedures. The bureaucratic requirements for legal guardianship created obstacles that tested everyone's commitment, while also providing opportunities for interference from officials who might question the propriety of a single man caring for unrelated children. Community reaction was mixed, with some neighbors expressing approval of Ezra's charitable actions, while others speculated about his motives or questioned whether children from unknown backgrounds could be trusted around valuable livestock and equipment. The social scrutiny created pressure to prove themselves worthy of community acceptance, while also managing the psychological stress of being constantly evaluated and judged by people who didn't know their history or circumstances. Economic pressures also emerged as ranch operations required seasonal adjustments that might affect the children's roles and responsibilities, creating uncertainty about their long-term security based on their continued usefulness rather than genuine family affection. The practical demands of ranch life during different seasons tested their adaptability while also determining whether their integration into ranch operations was sustainable year-round or only during periods of lighter work requirements. The challenges transformed all three family members in ways that strengthened their individual characters while deepening their mutual bonds and commitment to building lasting relationships based on love rather than just convenience or necessity. Danny's evolution from desperate protector to confident young rancher demonstrated remarkable resilience while also revealing leadership abilities and emotional intelligence that impressed everyone who worked with him. Lucy's transformation from terrified, clingy child to confident, happy girl who could interact comfortably with adults and contribute meaningfully to household operations showed healing that had seemed impossible during their months of survival on the streets. Her growing security in Ezra's protection allowed her natural personality to emerge, while also developing skills and interests that would serve her throughout life. Ezra's journey from isolated grief to renewed purpose and joy through his relationship with the children demonstrated that healing from devastating loss was possible when people opened themselves to new forms of love and family connection. His rediscovery of parental instincts and protective feelings proved that the capacity for family love could survive even the most traumatic losses when given opportunity to develop with new people who needed and appreciated such care. Most importantly, all three learned that family bonds created through choice and commitment could be stronger than those based solely on biological connection, and that mutual care and respect could overcome differences in background, age, and life experience when people chose to invest in each other's welfare and happiness. The warning signs of approaching crisis appeared gradually as the month-long trial period neared its end, creating pressure for formal decisions about adoption, inheritance, and permanent family status that would determine whether their growing bonds would be legally protected or remain vulnerable to external challenge and separation. The bureaucratic requirements for official adoption created opportunities for interference while also forcing examination of their relationship that might reveal weaknesses or inconsistencies. More ominously, Danny's growing awareness that his fabricated story about the Morrison gang could be exposed at any time created anxiety about whether Ezra would feel betrayed by the deception or would understand the desperation that had motivated the lie. The possibility that honesty about his motivations might destroy their relationship created internal conflict between his desire for authentic family connection and his fear that truth-telling might result in rejection and abandonment. The legal and social complications of a wealthy single man adopting two unrelated children created potential obstacles that could prevent formalization of their family bonds, even if all parties wanted to proceed, while also attracting attention from people who might challenge Ezra's motives or the children's suitability for inheritance of substantial property and assets. The final warning came when they realized that their happiness had made them vulnerable in ways they hadn't experienced since losing their parents, creating emotional stakes that made potential loss seem unbearable, while also making them question whether they deserved the security and love they'd found or whether fate would eventually reclaim what they'd gained. Because when love grows strong enough to overcome fear, it also becomes precious enough to defend against any threat. And Danny was about to discover that the greatest dangers to new families often come not from external enemies, but from the doubt and insecurity that make people question whether they deserve the happiness they found. The crisis erupted when a territorial marshal arrived at Blackwood Ranch with legal documents challenging Ezra's custody of the children and demanding proof of his authority to keep them without proper guardianship proceedings. The marshal's investigation had been triggered by anonymous complaints about impropriety and potential exploitation, creating official scrutiny that threatened to destroy their family bonds just as they'd grown strong enough to weather ordinary challenges, but remained vulnerable to legal interference. But the real catastrophe wasn't the legal challenge, it was the revelation that Danny's fabricated story about the Morrison gang had been discovered and reported to authorities, creating questions about his honesty and trustworthiness that could undermine everything they'd built together. The marshal's knowledge of the deception suggested that someone had been investigating their background and circumstances, possibly with malicious intent to destroy their happiness or to challenge Ezra's right to his property and assets. The timing of the investigation, just days before the end of their agreed-upon trial period, created pressure that seemed designed to prevent formal adoption, while also exposing all three family members to potential separation and legal consequences. Danny's terror that his lie had ruined their chances for permanent family unity activated guilt and despair that threatened to destroy his emotional stability. While Lucy's confusion about why adults were suddenly questioning their living situation brought back trauma from their earlier abandonment and loss. Most devastating was the possibility that Ezra might feel betrayed by Danny's deception, viewing the lie as evidence of manipulative character rather than desperate love for his sister. The potential loss of Ezra's trust and affection represented not just return to their previous circumstances, but destruction of the first genuine family happiness they'd experienced since their parents' death. Faced with legal documents that could force immediate separation of the children from Ezra and their return to institutional care or foster placement with strangers, all three family members had to choose between fighting the system that threatened to destroy them or accepting defeat that would end their relationship while potentially providing safety through compliance with official authority. Danny's decision to confess fully about his motivations for the fabricated story, accepting responsibility for the deception while explaining the desperation and love that had driven him to lie, represented the kind of honesty that could either destroy their relationship or strengthen it through complete transparency and trust. His willingness to face Ezra's potential anger and disappointment demonstrated growth from survival-focused deception toward authentic relationship based on truth rather than manipulation. Ezra's response to Danny's confession became the crucial test of their family bonds, determining whether their relationship could survive the revelation that it had begun with lies, or whether the love they'd developed over months of shared life could transcend the circumstances of their initial meeting. His choice between protecting his own reputation and legal position or defending the children who'd become precious to him would define his character while also determining their future. The marshal's demand for immediate resolution, either formal legal proceedings for adoption or removal of the children to official custody, created time pressure that prevented gradual adjustment or negotiated solutions, forcing decisive action that would either secure their family permanently or end it immediately. The stark nature of the choice eliminated middle ground that might have allowed more careful consideration of alternatives. Lucy's desperate plea that they not be separated, her tears and obvious terror at the prospect of losing the only stability she'd known since their parents' death, added emotional weight that made abstract legal considerations intensely personal for everyone involved, including the marshal who had to witness the potential destruction of genuine family happiness in service of bureaucratic procedures. The turning point came when Ezra's response to Danny's confession revealed not anger or betrayal, but admiration for the depth of love that had motivated the deception. Recognizing in the boy's protective instincts toward Lucy the same fierce devotion he'd felt toward his own deceased family, his acknowledgement that desperate circumstances sometimes required desperate measures demonstrated understanding that transcended legal technicalities to embrace moral complexity. But more than forgiveness, Ezra's revelation about his own deception, the fabricated test he'd used to assess their character, created moral equivalency that transformed Danny's life from betrayal into evidence of mutual desperation and mutual care. His admission that he'd been testing them just as they'd been deceiving him revealed that their relationship had been built on parallel needs rather than one-sided exploitation. The marshal's surprise at witnessing such genuine family affection and mutual protection, despite the irregular circumstances of their arrangement, forced him to consider whether legal compliance was more important than human welfare when the two objectives conflicted. His gradual recognition that destroying this family would harm rather than protect the children challenged his assumptions about the purpose of legal authority. Most importantly, the crisis revealed that their love for each other had grown strong enough to survive honesty about past deceptions, while also motivating all three to fight for their right to remain together rather than accepting separation as inevitable or proper, according to legal requirements that ignored emotional bonds. Because sometimes the most important fights are not against external enemies, but for the right to keep the family you've chosen, especially when that family was built through mutual need that grew into mutual love strong enough to challenge any authority that tries to tear it apart. The legal battle for their family's survival required careful preparation as Ezra gathered documentation proving his financial stability, character references from community leaders, and evidence of the children's improvement and happiness under his care. The preparation included both legal paperwork and emotional readiness for a process that would examine every aspect of their relationship while determining whether their bond was strong enough to meet official standards for family legitimacy. Danny and Lucy's involvement in preparing their own testimony about their experiences and preferences required them to articulate feelings and relationships that had developed naturally, but now needed formal expression for legal evaluation. Their ability to speak honestly about their love for Ezra and their desire to remain with him provided powerful evidence that their family bonds were genuine rather than coerced or artificial. Most crucially, the preparation included Ezra's decision to reveal his own background and motivations, sharing with authorities his grief over losing his biological family and his discovery that love could indeed grow again through relationships with children who needed the protection and guidance he was uniquely positioned to provide. His willingness to expose his own vulnerability demonstrated commitment to their family that transcended legal requirements to embrace emotional truth. The preparation also included practical elements as they documented the children's educational progress, health improvements, and social development under Ezra's care, creating evidence that their unconventional family arrangement was producing excellent results that justified legal recognition and protection. The tension reached its peak during formal hearings, where every aspect of their relationship was scrutinized by officials who had the power to either legitimize their family or destroy it permanently through enforced separation. The clinical examination of their emotional bonds, the requirement to justify love through legal arguments, and the possibility that bureaucratic decisions could override human welfare created stress that tested everyone's composure and resolve. Danny's testimony about his motivations and his relationship with both Lucy and Ezra required him to speak publicly about trauma, fear, and love in ways that made him vulnerable to judgment, while also providing evidence of his character and maturity. His ability to articulate complex emotions and relationships impressed legal observers, while also demonstrating the growth that had occurred under Ezra's guidance and protection. Lucy's testimony, though brief due to her age, proved particularly powerful as her obvious happiness, confidence, and attachment to both Danny and Ezra created visual evidence that supported their legal arguments. Her simple statements about feeling safe and loved provided emotional weight that complemented the formal documentation of their family's success. The climactic moment approached when the judge had to weigh legal precedent against human welfare, determining whether innovative family structures could be officially recognized when they served the best interests of all parties involved despite not conforming to traditional patterns of adoption and guardianship. The judge's initial questions revealed skepticism about unconventional family arrangements and concern about potential exploitation of vulnerable children by wealthy men whose motives might not be entirely altruistic. His systematic examination of their financial arrangements, living conditions, and educational provisions demonstrated thorough investigation while also creating opportunities for Ezra to prove his genuine commitment to the children's welfare rather than his own convenience or image. The testimony from Miguel and Rosa about their observations of the family's development provided external validation of the happiness and stability they'd witnessed, while character references from business associates and community leaders established Ezra's reputation for integrity and responsibility. The cumulative evidence began to paint a picture of successful family building despite irregular origins. Danny's detailed account of their desperate circumstances before meeting Ezra, combined with his obvious growth and development since joining the ranch, created powerful testimony about the positive impact of their arrangement on children who might otherwise have faced institutional care or continued homelessness, with potentially tragic results. The complication arose when the prosecuting attorney argued that emotional manipulation and financial inducement might have created artificial family bonds that served Ezra's desire for heirs, while potentially exploiting children too young and desperate to make truly independent decisions about their future. The suggestion that their happiness might be coerced rather than genuine challenged the authenticity of their relationships while raising questions about long-term welfare that legal adoption was designed to protect. More complex was the legal argument about precedent, with officials expressing concern that approving unconventional adoptions might encourage other irregular arrangements that could exploit rather than protect vulnerable children. The balance between recognizing genuine family bonds and preventing potential abuse created legal tensions that transcended their individual case to encompass broader policy questions. The most challenging complication was the requirement that Danny and Lucy express their preferences independently, without influence from Ezra, creating artificial separation during the legal process that caused emotional distress, while also providing opportunities for authorities to assess the genuineness of their attachment and the voluntariness of their choices. The crucial moment came when the judge asked Danny directly whether he understood that legal adoption would mean permanent commitment from all parties, that he would be accepting Ezra as his father in all legal and practical senses, while also accepting responsibility as heir to significant property and business obligations that would affect the rest of his life. Danny's response revealed maturity that impressed everyone present. Your Honor, I already think of Mr. Blackwood as my father, and I already feel responsible for Lucy's welfare and the ranch's success. Legal papers won't change what we feel for each other, but they'll protect what we've built together from people who think that families can only be made one way. Lucy's simple addition, Papa Ezra loves us, and we love him. And Danny taught me that love is what makes families real, provided emotional clarity that cut through legal complexity to acknowledge the fundamental truth that their bonds had grown authentic through daily care and mutual commitment rather than legal obligation or financial inducement. Ezra's final statement to the court acknowledged both the irregularity of their beginning and the genuineness of their current relationship. These children saved me from grief that was destroying my ability to find meaning in life, while I provided them with security they desperately needed. We chose each other out of necessity, but we've stayed together out of love that's grown stronger every day we've been a family. The breakthrough came with the judge's recognition that legal frameworks should serve human welfare rather than forcing human relationships to conform to artificial bureaucratic categories when those relationships were producing excellent outcomes for all involved parties. His ruling acknowledged that unconventional family formation could be legally recognized when supported by clear evidence of genuine affection, mutual benefit, and commitment to each other's long-term welfare. The formal adoption decree that granted Ezra legal custody while recognizing both children as his heirs created the security they'd all been seeking while also validating their relationship as genuine family rather than temporary arrangement. The legal protection would prevent future challenges while allowing their love to continue developing without external interference. Most importantly, the judge's decision established precedent for recognizing that families could be created through choice and commitment rather than just biology or traditional courtship, providing hope for other unconventional but loving relationships that served human needs despite not conforming to expected patterns. The months following their legal victory brought steady growth and development as they adjusted to their official status as family, while continuing to build on the foundation of love and respect that had sustained them through challenging times. Danny's growing confidence in his role as heir and his developing skills in ranch management impressed everyone who worked with him, while Lucy's continued happiness and educational progress provided ongoing evidence of their family's success. Ezra's renewed sense of purpose and joy in parenting demonstrated that love could indeed triumph over grief when people chose to open their hearts to new relationships rather than remaining trapped in sorrow over past losses. His pride in both children's development and his obvious happiness in their family life influenced other community members' understanding of what constituted proper family relationships. The legal recognition of their adoption created security that allowed all three to invest fully in their shared future without fear that external challenges might separate them, enabling long-term planning and emotional commitment that had been difficult when their relationship lacked official protection. Because sometimes the most beautiful families are those that prove love doesn't require perfect circumstances or traditional beginnings, but simply people brave enough to choose each other and wise enough to build something lasting from the courage to care when caring involves risk. The successful establishment of the Blackwood family sent powerful messages throughout Colorado Territory about the possibilities for creating loving relationships through unconventional means, when, motivated by genuine care for children's welfare rather than personal convenience or social expectation. Their story became inspiration for other potential adoptive families who might have hesitated to consider children from difficult backgrounds, proving that love could indeed overcome past trauma when supported by patience, commitment, and adequate resources. Danny's transformation from desperate street child to confident young rancher demonstrated that proper care and opportunity could help children overcome even the most challenging circumstances, while Lucy's obvious happiness and development provided evidence that family bonds created through choice could be just as strong as those created through birth. Their success challenged community assumptions about the requirements for successful child rearing while proving that unconventional families could produce excellent outcomes. Ezra's renewal from grief-stricken isolation to purposeful family leadership inspired other widowed or childless adults to consider adoption as a pathway to meaningful family relationships rather than viewing it as inferior alternative to biological parenthood. His example proved that love could indeed grow again after devastating loss when people opened themselves to new forms of connection and commitment. The legal precedent established by their adoption case influenced territorial and eventually state policies regarding child welfare and adoption procedures, creating more flexible approaches that prioritize children's actual welfare over strict adherence to traditional family formation patterns. The ranch that Danny eventually inherited became one of the most successful operations in Colorado, demonstrating that unconventional family backgrounds didn't prevent achievement of conventional success when supported by proper education, mentorship, and opportunity. His leadership style, influenced by Ezra's combination of firmness and compassion, created workplace environments that attracted the best employees while producing excellent results. Lucy's development into a confident, educated young woman who eventually established schools for orphaned and disadvantaged children extended their family's influence throughout the region, proving that children who'd been helped were often motivated to help others facing similar challenges. Her work created networks of support that saved lives while providing hope for families facing desperate circumstances. The model of adoption and child welfare that their family represented influenced how Colorado Territory and eventually the state approached child protection and family services, demonstrating that creative solutions could serve human needs better than rigid adherence to bureaucratic procedures when those procedures conflicted with actual welfare of vulnerable populations. Most significantly, their family became legendary throughout the region as proof that the most beautiful families are often those created through choice rather than chance, inspiring countless other adoptions and family formations based on mutual need that grew into mutual love through daily commitment and care. Danny discovered that leadership skills developed through survival necessity could be channeled into positive achievement when supported by education and mentorship, proving that difficult experiences could become sources of strength rather than permanent handicaps when approached with proper guidance and support. Lucy learned that security and love could indeed be permanent rather than temporary, that adults could be trusted to keep promises and provide protection, and that her own experiences with loss and recovery qualified her to help other children facing similar challenges. Ezra found that opening his heart to new love didn't diminish his memory of his deceased family, but actually honored their legacy by extending the care and protection they would have wanted him to provide to children who needed exactly what he had to offer. Their story proved that families are built through daily choices to care for each other, rather than just biological connections or legal documents, and that the most lasting bonds are often those created when people choose to need each other and then discover that need can grow into profound love that enriches everyone involved. The inspiring story of Danny, Lucy, and Ezra Blackwood reminds us that the most beautiful families are often those that prove love doesn't require perfect beginnings, but simply people brave enough to take care of each other when taking care requires everything they have to give. If you've been moved by this tale of how three people found each other when they needed family most, subscribe to our channel for more stories that show how ordinary acts of courage can create extraordinary families when people choose hope over fear and commitment over convenience. Click on the next video to discover another incredible story of frontier family building that proves the greatest legacy we can leave is the love we choose to share with those who need it most.